The space station floated in the darkness between star systems. It was called Concordia Prime, and it was bigger than most cities. Ships from 47 different alien species docked at its ports every day. Today, all of them had come for one reason. The Galactic Council was meeting to solve a big problem. Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood near the back of the Grand Assembly Hall. He wore his military uniform and kept his eyes moving around the room. His job was simple. He had to protect Ambassador Karen Fletcher, the woman who represented all of humanity in this meeting. Jake was good at his job. He had trained for years to be ready for anything. The hall was enormous. Its walls were made of some kind of crystal that reflected light from distant stars. Hundreds of aliens sat in rows of seats that curved around a central platform. They all looked different. Some had scales, some had fur, some looked like insects. Some looked like nothing Jake had ever seen before. Their voices filled the air, but small devices on their seats translated everything into words Jake could understand. Karen Fletcher sat in the human section. She was calm and professional, like always. She had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years now. Jake had worked with her for 2 of those years. He knew she was smart and tough. Even though she did not look dangerous, she wore a simple business suit and kept her hair tied back. She looked like someone who could be a teacher or a doctor. But Jake had seen her handle problems that would make most people run away. The meeting was about territory. Human colonies had settled on several planets in what was called the Outer Rim. These were worlds far from the center of the galaxy. No one had lived on them for hundreds of years. According to Council law, that made them free for anyone to claim. Humans had built homes there, farms, even small cities. Families lived on those worlds now. Children played in their streets, but the Xanthian Dominion said those worlds belonged to them. The Xanthians were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. Their empire controlled a third of all known space. They had ruled for 10,000 years. They did not like it when other species took things they believed were theirs. Emperor Vecthar sat on a raised platform that made him higher than everyone else. He was huge, more than 4 meters tall. His body was covered in hard plates that looked like armor. He had 4 arms and compound eyes that could see in many directions at once. His mandibles clicked when he spoke, making a sound like breaking sticks. "The human colonies are built on Xanthian territory," the Emperor said. His voice was deep and loud. The translator made it sound like thunder. "These worlds were claimed by the Dominion long ago. Humans have no right to them." Karen Fletcher stood up. She did not look afraid, even though the Emperor could probably break her in half with one hand. "Emperor Vecthar, those worlds were empty when we found them. The Xanthian Dominion left them 700 years ago. Under Council law, abandoned territory can be claimed by any species." The Emperor's plates rattled. Jake knew this was a sign of anger in Xanthians. Council law is new. Dominion law is ancient. We do not need permission to take back what is ours. "Then we have a problem," Fletcher said. Her voice was steady and clear. "Because humanity follows Council law, and we will defend our colonies." The other aliens in the hall started whispering to each other. Jake could see them shifting in their seats. Everyone knew what the ambassador was saying. If the Xanthians attacked human colonies, there would be war. And war with the Dominion was something most species wanted to avoid. The Xanthian military was legendary. They had conquered dozens of worlds. Their ships were powerful, and their soldiers were trained from birth to fight. Most species in the Council were afraid of them. Jake could see it in the way they avoided looking at the Emperor. They did not want to make him angry. Emperor Vecthar stood up from his throne. Even sitting, he had been tall. Standing, he looked like a giant. "Humans are children," he said. The contempt in his voice was clear even through the translator. "Your species has been in space for only a few decades. The Dominion has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. You will learn your place, or we will teach it to you." Jake felt his jaw tighten. The Emperor was not just disagreeing. He was threatening. And he was doing it in front of everyone. "Is that a threat, Emperor?" Fletcher asked. "It is a promise," Vecthar replied. The Dominion does not make threats. We take action. We take what belongs to us. The meeting ended soon after that. Nothing was solved. The Emperor left first, surrounded by his guards. They were almost as big as he was, and they carried weapons that hummed with energy. Other species hurried to follow him. Jake saw several ambassadors bowing to the Xanthians. They were already choosing sides, and they were choosing the side with the most guns. Fletcher walked out of the hall with Jake close behind her. She did not speak until they reached a quiet corridor. Then she stopped and took a deep breath. That went badly, she said. Yes, ma'am, Jake agreed. They walked to the observation deck. It was a large room with windows that showed the stars. Earth was visible in the distance, just a small blue dot. Jake had been born there. He had grown up in California, gone to school, joined the military, and trained to protect people. Now he was protecting humanity's voice in a galaxy full of aliens who did not respect them. Do you think he'll really attack? Jake asked. Fletcher stared at Earth. I think he wants to. The question is whether the Council will stop him. Will they? I don't know, she admitted. Most of them are too afraid of the Dominion to stand up to it. They'll make speeches about peace and law, but when it comes down to it, they'll probably look the other way. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. So we're on our own. We've always been on our own, Fletcher said. We're the new species. We don't have ancient alliances or trade agreements that go back centuries. If we want to survive in this galaxy, we have to prove we're worth respecting. How do we do that? Fletcher smiled, but it was not a happy smile. By not backing down, by showing them that humans might be young, but we're not weak. A message appeared on Fletcher's communication device. She read it, and her expression changed. The Emperor wants to meet with me privately tomorrow. No official record. No witnesses, except our security details. Jake did not like the sound of that. That seems unusual. It is, Fletcher said. But if there's any chance to avoid war, I have to try. She looked at Jake. I want you there with me. Stay close. And stay alert. Always, ma'am. They stood there for a while, looking at their home planet. Jake thought about the colonies. He thought about the families who had traveled across the galaxy to build new lives. They had left Earth, looking for opportunity and freedom. They did not deserve to be caught in a war between ancient empires. What if talking doesn't work? Jake asked. Fletcher was quiet for a moment. Then we fight. And we make sure the galaxy knows that humans don't surrender. That night, Jake could not sleep. He lay in his quarters on the station and thought about what might happen. The Xanthians were strong. Their empire was vast, but humans had something the Xanthians did not understand. They had survived wars and disasters and near extinction on their own planet. They had learned to stand up to bullies and tyrants. They had learned that sometimes, the only way to earn respect was to refuse to be afraid. The next morning, Jake put on his uniform and checked his weapon. It was a standard military sidearm, powerful enough to stop most threats. He hoped he would not need to use it. But he was ready if he did. Fletcher met him in the corridor. She looked tired, like she had not slept much either. But her eyes were clear and determined. Ready? She asked. Ready, ma'am. They walked toward the Xanthian section of the station. The corridors grew darker and quieter. There were no neutral security forces here. Only Xanthian guards in their ceremonial armor. Jake noticed that the armor looked old and traditional, but he suspected it was more than decoration. The Xanthians did not do things just for show. The guards led them to a circular room with dark metal walls. Emperor Vecthar waited in the center. Two of his personal guards stood beside him. The door closed behind Jake and Fletcher with a sound like a prison cell locking. Ambassador Fletcher, the Emperor said, thank you for coming. I'm always willing to talk about peace. Emperor, Fletcher replied. The Emperor began to circle her slowly. His movements reminded Jake of a predator stalking prey. Jake's hand moved closer to his weapon. But he kept his face calm. He had to trust that Fletcher knew what she was doing. Peace, Vecthar repeated. He made the words sound like an insult. In the Dominion, we have a saying, Peace is what the strong give to the weak when they submit. The Emperor continued to speak. His voice filled the small room. I could destroy your species with a single command. Your ships would burn. Your colonies would fall. And the Council would watch in silence because they know better than to challenge the Dominion. Jake saw Fletcher's jaw tighten. She had listened to the Emperor's threats long enough. Then why haven't you? She asked. The Emperor paused. What did you say? If you're so powerful, if we're so weak, why call this meeting? Fletcher took a step forward. The Emperor was forced to step back slightly. I'll tell you why. Because you're not sure. You've watched humanity go from primitive flight to faster-than-light travel in less than a century. You've seen how we adapt and overcome every challenge. And it scares you. The Emperor's mandibles clicked together rapidly. It was a sign of extreme anger. You dare speak to me this way? I dare to tell the truth, Fletcher said. You're not afraid of what we are now. You're afraid of what we might become if you give us time. So you're trying to crush us before we become a real threat. Vekthar's guards moved forward, but the Emperor raised one of his 4 hands to stop them. His compound eyes focused on Fletcher with an intensity that would have made most beings step back. But Fletcher held her ground. Your courage is impressive, the Emperor said. His voice was cold now, all pretense of diplomacy gone. But courage without power is meaningless. Let me show you something. One of the guards activated a device. A holographic image appeared in the air between them. It showed dozens of massive ships, all bearing the markings of the Xanthian military. The ships were arranged in battle formation, ready for war. This fleet is positioned near your colonial space, Vekthar explained. 30 capital ships, each one capable of destroying a planet. They will move into the disputed zone in 72 hours. Your colonies will evacuate or they will be eliminated. This is not open for discussion. Fletcher stared at the display. Jake could see her calculating, thinking about the families on those worlds. 30 ships was more than enough to overwhelm the small defense forces humanity had in that sector. The Council will never approve this action, Fletcher said. The Emperor smiled. The expression looked wrong on his alien face. The Council has already been informed. I have spent months building support, making agreements, offering incentives. The majority of species will express concern and call for peaceful solutions, but they will do nothing to stop me. I made sure of that before I even called this meeting. You manipulated the Council, Fletcher said. I used the system that exists. Vekthar corrected. The strong make the rules. The weak follow them or suffer. This is how the galaxy has always worked. Jake watched Fletcher's expression. They had been outmaneuvered. The Emperor had planned this for months, maybe years. He had turned the Council into a tool for his own purposes, and now he was here to enjoy watching the human ambassador realize she had no options left. I see, Fletcher said slowly. So there's nothing to discuss. Finally, you understand, the Emperor said. He gestured toward the door. You may go. Use the next 72 hours to evacuate your people. The Dominion can show mercy to those who accept their place. Fletcher turned to leave. Jake started to follow her. But then the Emperor spoke again. Oh, Ambassador Fletcher? Vekthar called. When you report this to your government, make sure they understand the lesson. The galaxy has an order. Ancient species rule. Young species obey. Humans tried to rise above their station. Now you will learn humility through loss. Fletcher stopped walking. Her shoulders tensed. Jake had worked with her long enough to know what that meant. The ambassador was done, being polite. She turned around slowly. Emperor Vekthar, there's something you need to understand about humans. And what is that? He asked. His tone suggested he thought nothing she said could matter. We're really terrible at learning humility. The Emperor laughed. The sound was harsh and mocking. Your species' arrogance will destroy you. No, Fletcher said. Her voice was different now. Harder. Your species' arrogance will destroy you. Vekthar's laughter stopped. You forget where you are, human. This is my territory. My station. My domain. You have no power here. I have the truth, Fletcher replied. And that's more powerful than your entire empire. The Emperor moved forward quickly, using his massive size to try to intimidate her. You will show me respect, or I will teach you what happens to those who insult the Dominion. Jake moved closer to Fletcher. His hand was on his weapon now, ready to draw it. The Xanthian guards did the same. Their weapons made a high-pitched sound as they powered up. Stand away from the ambassador, one of the guards said to Jake, but Fletcher raised her hand slightly, telling Jake to hold his position. She kept her eyes on the Emperor. You want respect? She asked Vecthar. Then act in a way that deserves respect. You're not a leader, Emperor. You're just a bully with an army. You've built your empire on fear. And now you're terrified that someone might stand up to you. The Emperor's body plates rattled with rage. I have conquered worlds while your species lived in primitive shelters. I have commanded fleets numbering in the thousands. I have ruled an empire longer than your civilization has existed. And in all that time, Fletcher said quietly, you never learned that being strong doesn't make you right. The Emperor's hand shot out faster than Jake expected. Vecthar grabbed Fletcher by the throat and lifted her off the ground. The Xanthians were incredibly strong, far stronger than humans. The Emperor's grip was crushing. You will learn your place, Vecthar snarled. Everything happened fast after that. Jake drew his weapon, but the Xanthian guards were already aiming at him. He would not be able to fire before they did. Fletcher was choking, her face turning red as she clawed at the Emperor's grip, but Fletcher was not helpless. She reached down and pressed the emergency button on her communicator. The device activated, broadcasting on the Council's emergency frequency. Every species on the station would hear what happened next. This is Ambassador Karen Fletcher of Earth, she gasped into the communicator. Her voice was strained but clear. I am being attacked by Emperor Vecthar. He is violating diplomatic protocols. I need immediate help. The Emperor's eyes went wide as he realized what she had done. The communication had been broadcast across the entire station. There would be witnesses now, evidence, records. You clever little, he started to say, but Fletcher cut him off. Jake. Protocol 7. Jake knew Protocol 7. They had trained for it but never thought they would need it. He fired his weapon at the floor between himself and the guards. The blast created a flash of bright light and disrupted their weapons' targeting systems. In the same moment, he lunged forward toward Fletcher and the Emperor. The guards were fast. They were trained warriors, but they were focused on Jake as the threat. They did not expect Fletcher to do anything while hanging from the Emperor's grip. Fletcher had grown up in a rough part of Detroit. She had learned to fight long before she learned diplomacy. Her knee came up hard, driving into what passed for the Emperor's midsection. The blow would not do much damage to his armored body, but it surprised him. His grip loosened. Fletcher dropped to the ground, rolled away, and came up behind Jake. The guards moved to attack, but the door suddenly burst open. Station security rushed in with weapons ready. Behind them came representatives from multiple species, all of them drawn by Fletcher's emergency broadcast. Everyone froze. Emperor Vecthar stood in the center of the room with his guards beside him. Across from them stood Fletcher and Jake, backed by station security. Between them was the holographic display, still showing the Xanthian fleet ready to attack human colonies. The station's head of security, an alien called an arbitrator, pushed through the crowd. What is happening here? Emperor. The human ambassador claims you attacked her. Vecthar straightened, trying to regain his dignity. A misunderstanding. The human was disrespectful and I simply choked me while threatening my people with genocide, Fletcher finished. Her voice was rough from being strangled, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. She pointed at the holographic display. He revealed plans to attack human colonies in 72 hours. He admitted to secretly negotiating with council members to make sure they wouldn't interfere, and he used physical violence against a diplomatic representative. The Emperor continued speaking to the crowd. We are the power that maintains order in this galaxy. You need us more than we need you. No. said a voice from the crowd. A representative from one of the smaller species stepped forward. We tolerate you because we fear you. That's different from needing you, another voice joined in. The Dominion has used fear to control us for too long. More representatives began speaking up. They had been silent for years, afraid to challenge the Empire. But seeing Fletcher stand against the Emperor had given them courage. If a human could do it, maybe they could too. Vekthar's mandibles clicked rapidly. You forget yourselves. All of you. And you, Fletcher said, her voice growing stronger despite the pain in her throat. Forgot that empires built on fear eventually face people who refuse to be afraid. The Emperor turned on her. Jake saw something break in those alien eyes. Vekthar had ruled through intimidation his entire life. He had never been challenged like this. Now, a human, a species he considered beneath him, had humiliated him in front of the entire galaxy. You will regret this. Vekthar hissed at Fletcher. I will make an example of your species. Your worlds will burn. Your people will. Enough, the arbitrator commanded. Emperor Vekthar, you are being detained pending a full council investigation. The Xanthian guards moved to defend their emperor, but they were surrounded by station security from multiple species. The numbers were not in their favor. The standoff lasted for a long, tense moment. No one moved. No one breathed. Then Emperor Vekthar made his final mistake. He lunged at Fletcher, clearly intending to finish what he had started. He wanted to silence her permanently. Jake moved to intercept, but Fletcher was already reacting. Years of self-defense training kicked in automatically. She sidestepped the Emperor's charge and grabbed his reaching arm. Using his own momentum against him, she redirected his force. The physics worked in her favor. Vekthar was larger and much stronger. But he was also top-heavy and moving fast. Fletcher's technique turned his strength into a weakness. The Emperor crashed into the metal floor with a sound like breaking pottery, but he was not finished. Vekthar tried to get up, still reaching for Fletcher with murderous intent in his eyes. Station security moved to restrain him, but they were not trained to handle angry emperors. Fletcher looked at Jake. Help me with this. Help me with this. Together, they grabbed the struggling emperor. Jake took one arm, Fletcher took the other. They began dragging the emperor toward the door. Vekthar fought against them with all his considerable strength. His rage made him clumsy, but he was still incredibly powerful. Let me go, the emperor snarled. I am Vekthar of the Xanthian Dominion. I am an emperor. You cannot treat me this way. You assaulted a diplomatic representative, Fletcher said, pulling him forward. Right now, you're just a criminal. They hauled him through the doorway and into the corridor beyond. Word of what had happened had spread through the station like fire. Aliens from dozens of species lined the halls. They had come to see if the rumors were true, and they were. A human ambassador and her security officer were dragging a mighty emperor through the corridors of Concordia Prime. Vekthar thrashed and roared. His body plates rattled. His mandibles snapped at the air. But Jake and Fletcher did not let go. Every step was a struggle. The emperor was heavy and strong, but they kept moving forward, corridor after corridor, past hundreds of witnesses. You are destroying yourself, Vekthar shouted at Fletcher. The Dominion will never forgive this humiliation. Your species will be hunted to the end of the galaxy. Fletcher stopped. She forced the Emperor to face her. Then, let me be clear, Emperor. If the Dominion wants war with humanity, we'll give you one. But it won't be the easy victory you're expecting. We don't have your ancient fleets or your vast empire. What we have is the refusal to accept that might makes right, and we'll fight for that belief until your empire learns it or breaks trying to stop us. She started pulling him forward again. Jake matched her pace. Together they dragged the Emperor through the halls of power, while the galaxy watched in stunned silence. Aliens who had spent their lives bowing to the Dominion now saw their Emperor reduced to this. Being hauled along by a human woman half his size and her security officer. It was unthinkable. It was unprecedented. It was happening right in front of them. Some of the watching aliens looked afraid. They knew the Dominion would want revenge for this. But others looked different. Their expressions showed something Jake had not expected to see. They looked hopeful, as if seeing the Emperor brought low had freed something inside them. They finally reached the detention facility. Security personnel took custody of Vecthar, placing him in a cell designed for high-risk prisoners. The Emperor stopped struggling. He sat down heavily and stared at nothing. The fight had gone out of him. Fletcher leaned against a wall, breathing hard. Her throat was bruised from where the Emperor had choked her. Her hands were shaking from the adrenaline. But she was alive, and she had made her point. Jake stood beside her, also catching his breath. "That was crazy, ma'am." "Yeah," Fletcher agreed. "But necessary." The arbitrator approached them. "Ambassador Fletcher, I need formal statements from both of you. The Council is convening an emergency session to address this situation." The Fletcher, "Thank you for watching." The Kreese, "The Council is convening an emergency session." The Fletcher, "Take the situation. Will they actually do something?" Fletcher asked. "Or will they find a way to let the Emperor go?" "Odo." The arbitrator's expression was hard to read on his alien features. "That remains to be seen. The Dominion is powerful. Many species depend on them. But you've created a situation they cannot ignore. You've given voice to those who have been silent too long." Over the next hours, Jake watched as the political situation developed. The Dominion immediately demanded Vecthar's release. They sent diplomats and made threats. But other species pushed back. Some of the smaller civilizations filed official complaints about Xanthian intimidation during previous diplomatic sessions. Fletcher's stand had opened a door. Species that had been too afraid to speak up before now found their courage. The evidence was clear. The Emperor had broken the law. And for the first time in thousands of years, the Dominion was being held accountable. The Council voted to place Emperor Vecthar under formal arrest pending trial. The vote was close, but it passed. Many species who had secretly agreed to support the Dominion's attack on human colonies now voted against them. They had seen what happened when you challenged the Empire, and they had seen the Empire lose. Jake was present when they informed the Emperor of the decision. Vecthar listened in silence. His compound eyes were dull, his body plates no longer gleaming. "You have made a grave mistake," the Emperor said quietly. "The Dominion will not tolerate this. The Dominion will follow Council law like everyone else," the arbitrator replied. "If you resist, you will face the combined forces of every member species." "You would go to war over this?" Vecthar asked. "We would go to war for the principle that no one is above the law," the arbitrator said. The ambassador was right about that. Fletcher requested a meeting with the Emperor. The Council reluctantly agreed. Jake accompanied her as security, along with multiple observers monitoring everything. She sat across from Vecthar in a visiting chamber. A transparent barrier separated them. The Emperor looked smaller somehow, diminished by his circumstances. "Why did you come?" Vecthar asked. "Because I wanted you to understand something," Fletcher said. "I don't hate you, Emperor. I don't even hate the Dominion. But I couldn't let you threaten my people without responding. So you humiliated me instead." "I defended myself," Fletcher corrected. "You're the one who turned it into humiliation. You could have negotiated. We would have found a compromise. But you needed to dominate, to prove you were superior. That's why you're sitting in this cell." Vecthar was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter. "Do you know what the worst part is, Ambassador? You're right. I have ruled through fear for so long that I forgot any other way existed. When you refused to be afraid, I did not know how to respond except with more threats." "You could learn," Fletcher suggested. "The Council is offering the Dominion a choice: accept oversight on future territorial actions and face moderate consequences, or reject the judgment and face isolation from the galactic community. The Dominion does not compromise. Then the Dominion will fall," Fletcher said simply. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually." Because the galaxy is changing, Emperor. Species are tired of living in fear. They want a council that actually enforces its laws, where justice matters more than military strength. And if the Dominion chooses war? Vecthar asked. Fletcher's expression became hard. Then humanity will fight alongside every other species that has decided they've had enough of being bullied. We're not the strongest, or the oldest, or the most advanced, but we're very good at standing up to tyrants. The Emperor studied her for a long moment. I underestimated your species. 3 months passed slowly. The trial dominated galactic news during that entire time. Every species watched to see what would happen. Would the Council really punish an Emperor, or would they find a way to let him go free? Jake stood outside the medical bay while doctors finished examining Ambassador Fletcher. She had recovered from the physical injuries quickly. The bruises on her throat had faded within weeks, but the political situation was more complicated than any injury. The Xanthian Dominion had recalled their military fleet from human colonial space, for now. But they made it clear this was temporary. They were waiting to see what happened to their Emperor. Captain Dan Foster walked up to Jake in the corridor. He was the commanding officer of the Earth cruiser Defender, which had been stationed at Concordia Prime since the incident. Lieutenant, Foster said. How's the ambassador? She's fine, sir. Just routine checks. Foster nodded. The council is voting today on the final charges. Could go either way. Round. What do you think will happen? Jake asked. Honestly, I don't know. Foster looked out a nearby window at the stars. The Dominion is powerful. A lot of species still depend on them for trade and protection. Convicting an emperor could destabilize the entire region. So they'll let him go, Jake said bitterly. Maybe. Or maybe Fletcher changed something when she stood up to him. Foster glanced at Jake. You were there. You saw it happen. Do you think she knew what she was starting? Jake thought about that moment in the private chamber. When the Emperor grabbed Fletcher's throat, when she activated her communicator and called for help instead of just trying to survive. I think she knew exactly what she was doing, sir. The medical bay door opened. Fletcher walked out looking healthy and strong. She saw the two men and smiled. Gentlemen, I'm fine. The doctors worry too much. Can't blame them. Ma'am, Foster said. You gave everyone quite a scare. The Emperor gave me quite a scare, Fletcher corrected. I just responded appropriately. They walked together to the council chambers. The vote was scheduled for that afternoon. Representatives from every species gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall. The room was packed. This was history being made, one way or another. The arbitrator called the session to order. We are here to vote on formal charges against Emperor Vecthar of the Xanthian Dominion. The charges include assault on a diplomatic representative, threats of military action against a member species, and manipulation of council proceedings through secret agreements. Vecthar sat in a special section for the accused. He wore simple clothes instead of his imperial robes. Guards surrounded him, but he was not restrained. He watched the proceedings with an expression Jake could not read. The evidence has been reviewed, the arbitrator continued. Video recordings, audio files, and testimony from multiple witnesses all confirm the events, as described by Ambassador Fletcher. The defense has argued that the Emperor's actions were justified by human provocation and disrespect. The council must now decide. One by one, species cast their votes. It was not unanimous. Many voted to dismiss the charges, citing the Dominion's importance to galactic stability. Others voted to convict, arguing that no one should be above the law. The vote was close. Jake counted in his head as each species made their choice. It came down to the final few votes. A representative from a small species called the Quelvan stood up. We vote to convict. For too long, we have accepted that power determines justice. Today, we choose a different path. The final tally appeared on displays throughout the hall. The motion to formally charge Emperor Vecthar passed by exactly 3 votes. The hall erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others protested. The Xanthian delegation stood up and walked out as a group, their body language showing anger and disgust. But the vote stood. For the first time in galactic history, An emperor would face trial for crimes committed against another species. Over the following weeks, negotiations began. The Dominion was given a choice. They could accept the verdict and agree to reforms, or they could reject it and face sanctions from the Council. Jake watched as Xanthian diplomats met with Council representatives day after day. The discussions were heated. Several times it seemed like the Dominion would choose war rather than accept judgment. But slowly, something changed. Species that had been silent for centuries started speaking up. They filed complaints about past Xanthian actions. They demanded accountability. The political landscape was shifting, and even the mighty Dominion could feel it. Fletcher spent her time meeting with various species, building support for the idea that the Council's laws should apply to everyone equally. Jake accompanied her to dozens of these meetings. He watched her argue and persuade and negotiate. "You're good at this," he told her after one particularly difficult session. "At what?" she asked. "Politics, diplomacy, getting people to see your point of view." Fletcher laughed. "I'm just being honest with them. Most species want the same things: safety, justice, a fair chance to build their civilizations. The Dominion has prevented that for too long. Do you think they'll accept the Council's terms?" "They have to," Fletcher said. "The alternative is too costly, even for them." Quote, she was right. After 6 weeks of negotiations, the Xanthian Dominion announced they would accept the Council's judgment. Emperor Vecthar would face trial. The Dominion would submit their future military operations to Council oversight. They would pay reparations to species they had wronged. It was not a complete victory. The reforms were limited. The Dominion retained most of their power and territory. But it was a start. It was proof that even ancient empires could be held accountable. The day the agreement was signed, Fletcher was invited to witness the ceremony. She stood in the Grand Assembly Hall, surrounded by representatives from across the galaxy. The mood was cautiously hopeful. The arbitrator read the terms aloud. The Xanthian ambassador signed the document. It became official. The era of unchecked Dominion power was over. After the ceremony, Emperor Vecthar requested to speak with Fletcher one more time. She agreed, with Jake present as always. They met in a conference room with transparent walls. Everyone could see them, but the audio was private. The Emperor looked different than he had months ago, less imposing, more thoughtful. "Ambassador Fletcher," he began, "I owe you an apology." Fletcher raised an eyebrow. "That's unexpected. I have had months to think about what happened, about my actions and their consequences." Vecthar's mandibles clicked softly. "I was raised to believe that strength was the only thing that mattered, that empires were built through force. You showed me I was wrong." "I didn't mean to teach you anything," Fletcher said. "I was just trying to survive and protect my people. Sometimes the most important lessons are the ones we do not intend to give." The Emperor looked around the room at all the people watching. "I see now that the galaxy is changing. The old ways of empire and conquest are ending. I do not fully understand what comes next, but I must learn." "It's called cooperation," Fletcher said. "It means treating other species as equals. Negotiating instead of conquering. Following laws instead of making them. That will be difficult for the Dominion," Vecthar admitted. "We have thousands of years of tradition to overcome." "Then start by respecting other species' rights," Fletcher suggested. "It's not complicated." The Emperor was quiet for a moment. "You humans have been in space for less than a century. Yet you lecture an empire that has existed for 10,000 years. Someone needed to," Fletcher replied. To Jake's surprise, the Emperor made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are unusual, Ambassador Fletcher." "I'm really not," Fletcher said. "Any human would have done the same thing when threatened. We don't back down easily." "Then the Dominion will need to change how we interact with your species." "With all species," Fletcher emphasized. "That's the whole point. No one gets to rule through fear anymore." Vecthar nodded slowly. "I understand. Or I am beginning to." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Ambassador, when you dragged me through those corridors, You humiliated me in front of everyone." Jake tensed, but Fletcher stayed calm. "I know. That humiliation may have saved my empire," the Emperor said quietly. "You forced us to see ourselves as others see us. That was a gift, even though it hurt." He left without waiting for a response. Jake looked at Fletcher. "Did he just thank you for dragging him through the station?" "I think so," Fletcher said, sounding surprised. "I'll always have your back, ma'am," Jake promised. Fletcher accepted the position. 1 year after the incident with Emperor Vecthar, she stood in the Grand Assembly Hall once again. But this time, she was not there to argue or defend. She was there to be sworn in as Chief Mediator of the Galactic Council. The ceremony was formal and traditional. Representatives from every species attended. Even the Xanthians came, led by Emperor Vecthar himself. He had changed over the past year. His bearing was different. Less aggressive, more willing to listen. The arbitrator called the assembly to order. The hall fell silent. "We gather today to inaugurate Ambassador Karen Fletcher as Chief Mediator. This is a new position, created to help resolve disputes between member species before they escalate into violence." Fletcher walked to the center of the hall. She wore formal clothing that represented Earth. Simple but dignified. Jake stood nearby in his new captain's uniform. He had been named head of the Mediator's security team. The arbitrator administered the oath. Fletcher promised to serve the council fairly, to mediate disputes without bias, to uphold the law over personal interests. Her voice was clear and strong as she spoke the words. When the oath was complete, she turned to face the assembled representatives. 1 year ago, I was attacked by an emperor who believed power gave him the right to threaten and harm others. Today, that same emperor sits in this hall as proof that no one is above the law. She paused, looking around at the different species. I come from Earth, a young world by galactic standards. We have been in space for less than a century. We do not have ancient empires or vast fleets. What we have is a belief that every being deserves respect and dignity, regardless of their species or their power. That belief is what I bring to this position. When disputes come before me, I will not favor the strong over the weak. I will not favor the old over the young. I will look at the facts, apply the law, and make decisions based on what is right, not what is convenient. Some of you will disagree with my decisions. Some of you will think I am wrong. That is acceptable. But understand that I will always try to do what is just, even when it is difficult. The hall was silent for a moment. Then Emperor Vecthar stood up from his seat. Every eye turned to him. "Chief Mediator Fletcher," he said. His voice carried through the hall like it always did. But the tone was different now. "The Xanthian Dominion recognizes your authority. We pledge to respect your decisions and work with you to maintain peace." One by one, other species stood and made similar pledges. It was unprecedented. The council had never had a single mediator with such widespread support, but Fletcher had earned their trust by standing up when others would have backed down. After the ceremony, delegates mingled and talked. The atmosphere was positive. Different species were actually talking to each other as equals, not as conquerors and conquered. Vecthar approached Fletcher again. Jake stayed close, but he no longer felt the same tension as before. The Emperor had proven over the past year that he was trying to change. "You have accomplished something remarkable," Vecthar said to Fletcher. "The galaxy respects you." "The galaxy respects the idea that power should be limited," Fletcher replied. "I just happened to demonstrate it." "Do not diminish your achievement," the Emperor said. "You changed history when you refused to be intimidated. Many would have surrendered. You chose to fight back." "I chose to defend myself and my people," Fletcher corrected. "That's all." "That was enough," Vecthar said. He gestured at the other species in the hall. "Look at them. Species that once feared the Dominion now negotiate with us as equals. The weak have found their voices because you showed them it was possible." Fletcher watched the crowd. She saw species from all over the galaxy talking, laughing, making agreements. The council actually felt like a community now. not just a group forced together by necessity. I hope they keep speaking up, she said. The galaxy needs more voices, not fewer. It does, the Emperor agreed. And I have been thinking about your concept of democracy. The Dominion has never practiced such a system. But perhaps it is time we learned. That would be a major change for your empire, Fletcher said carefully. Major changes seem to be the theme of our time, Vecthar replied. You humans have brought them whether we wanted them or not. We did not ask to be revolutionary, Fletcher said. We just asked to be treated fairly, and in asking, you changed everything. The Emperor bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. History will remember this era as the time when the old order ended and something new began. And they will remember it started the day a human dragged an emperor through the halls of power. Jake watched the conversation from a few meters away. He thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that confrontation in a private chamber to this moment of recognition and respect. It had been dangerous. It could have ended badly. But Fletcher had been right to stand her ground. Around him, the celebration continued. Representatives from different species were actually enjoying each other's company. There was laughter in the hall. Genuine warmth between former enemies. It was not perfect, and there would be more conflicts in the future. But this was real progress. Fletcher excused herself from the Emperor and made her way to Jake. Well, Captain, how does it feel to be head of security for the chief mediator? It feels like I'll be very busy, Jake said honestly. This job is going to make a lot of powerful beings angry at you. Probably, Fletcher agreed. But that's okay. Someone needs to make the tough decisions. They walked together to the observation deck. It had become their place to think and talk away from the politics. Earth was visible in the distance, their home among the stars. Do you ever miss it? Jake asked. Just being a regular ambassador instead of the person everyone looks to for answers? Sometimes, Fletcher admitted. This new job is going to be harder than anything I have done before. I will be mediating conflicts between species that have hated each other for centuries. I will be making decisions that could prevent wars or start them. You'll do fine, Jake said. You've already proven you can stand up to emperors. Fletcher smiled. I had help with that. Still have help, I hope. Always, Jake promised. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ships come and go from the station. Each ship represented a different species, a different culture, a different way of seeing the universe, but they were all part of the council now. All working together, however imperfectly, to build something better than what had come before. What do you think happens next? Jake asked. More conflicts, Fletcher said. More disputes. More species trying to gain advantages over their neighbors. But also, more cooperation. More species learning to work together. More beings who refuse to accept that might makes right. Because you taught them how, Jake said. No, Fletcher corrected gently. I just showed them it was possible. They're the ones choosing to stand up now. That's what really matters. I recede. Below them in the detention facility, Emperor Vecthar walked freely now. His trial had concluded months ago. He had been found guilty but given a suspended sentence in recognition of the reforms he had begun implementing. He had changed from an absolute ruler to a constitutional emperor, sharing power with elected representatives. It was not perfect. The Dominion still had problems. Old habits did not disappear overnight. But the direction was clear. They were moving toward something better. Vecthar looked up at the observation deck, knowing Fletcher was there. He thought about empires and how they changed, about pride and how it could blind leaders to truth, about a human who had grabbed his arm and dragged him through corridors, teaching him a lesson he should have learned centuries ago. The galaxy was different now. The old ways of conquest and domination were fading. Law mattered more than military strength. Cooperation was replacing submission. Justice was becoming more important than fear. And it had started because one human refused to accept her place. The Emperor smiled, an expression that had become easier over time. Perhaps the humans were right. Perhaps there was strength in standing for principles, even against overwhelming power. Perhaps the smallest voice saying no could be more powerful than the largest empire saying yes. He would never say it out loud, but he was grateful for what had happened, grateful for the lesson, grateful for the human who had taught it, grateful for the day his empire was humbled and shown a better path. The galaxy continued spinning through space, full of billions of beings and infinite possibilities. And in the middle of it all, humans kept exploring and growing and challenging the way things had always been. They refused to accept that the universe had to stay the same, because that was what humans did. They looked at the impossible and tried anyway. They faced empires and refused to back down. They dragged the old order, sometimes quite literally, into a new era, and the galaxy was better because of it. Fletcher and Jake remained on the observation deck for a while longer, watching their homeworld turn slowly against the stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conflicts, new threats to peace, but tonight, they could enjoy this moment of victory. They had stood against an emperor and won. They had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. They had proven that courage and principle could overcome fear and force. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The station lights dimmed as artificial night began. Ships continued arriving and departing. The council chambers emptied as representatives returned to their quarters. The galaxy settled into its rhythms, different now than it had been a year ago, better now, more just, more hopeful. All because one human refused to be afraid. All because one woman stood her ground when an emperor tried to make her submit. All because humanity brought to the stars the same stubborn determination that had carried them through every crisis in their history. The refusal to accept that might makes right. The insistence that every being deserves dignity. The courage to stand up, even when standing up seemed impossible. These were the gifts humanity gave the galaxy. And the galaxy, slowly but surely, was learning to accept them. The story of the day a human dragged an emperor through the halls of power would be told for generations. It would inspire others to find their own courage. It would remind the powerful that their power had limits. It would prove that change was possible, even when it seemed impossible. And at the heart of that story would be Karen Fletcher, a simple ambassador who refused to learn her place, and Jake Morrison, the captain who stood beside her, and Emperor Vecthar, who learned that being humbled could lead to wisdom. Together, they had changed the galaxy. The end. The changes came slowly after that. The Dominion began implementing reforms. They were not dramatic changes, but they were real. Other aggressive species watched and started to moderate their own behavior. The Council gained new respect. When disputes arose, species actually brought them to the Council instead of settling things with military force. It was not perfect, but it was better. Humanity's position improved as well. Species that had dismissed humans as young and weak now treated them with respect. Trade agreements were signed. Technology was shared. New friendships formed. Jake was promoted to captain. Fletcher was offered a new position as the Council's chief mediator. She would help resolve disputes between species, working to prevent conflicts before they started. "It's a big job," she told Jake when she heard about the offer. "I'll be responsible for keeping peace across the entire galaxy." "You can handle it," Jake said confidently. Fletcher smiled. "Only if you come with me. I need someone I trust watching my back." "Yes, you did," Fletcher agreed. "Don't make that mistake again." After the meeting, Jake walked with Fletcher to the observation deck. Earth was visible in the distance, small and blue against the darkness of space. "Do you think the Dominion will accept the Council's terms?" Jake asked. "I don't know," Fletcher admitted. "Pride makes people do stupid things. But we've shown them that conquest isn't as easy as it used to be." "You showed them," Jake corrected. "You're the one who stood up to an emperor." Fletcher smiled tiredly. "I had help. When he grabbed me, I knew you would have my back. Always, ma'am." They stood together, watching their home world turn slowly in space. All around them, the galaxy continued on. The crowd of alien representatives began talking all at once. Several species who had apparently made secret deals with the Dominion looked uncomfortable. "These are serious charges," the arbitrator said. "They are lies," Vecthar snapped. "The word of a human against an emperor. Who will you believe?" Fletcher smiled grimly despite the pain in her throat. "It's not just my word. My communicator recorded everything. Audio, video, medical data showing the physical assault. It's all been automatically uploaded to the Council's secure servers. Anyone can review it." The Emperor's expression changed from anger to something Jake had never seen on a Xanthian face before. It might have been fear. "You used deception against the Dominion?" Vecthar asked. "I documented a crime," Fletcher corrected. "You attacked a diplomatic representative, threatened a member species with military force, and tried to manipulate the Council through secret agreements. Those are all violations of Council law." Vecthar looked around at all the witnesses. He seemed to realize his position had changed, but instead of backing down, his expression became cold and dangerous. "None of this matters," he said. "The Dominion is above your laws. Humanity doesn't submit," Fletcher said quietly. The Emperor stopped in front of her. He towered over the human ambassador, using his size to intimidate her. "No? Then let me explain something to you, Ambassador. The Dominion will take back those colony worlds. Your people will leave, or they will be removed by force. The Council will not stop us, because they fear us. Your species stands alone." Fletcher did not step back. She looked up at the Emperor and kept her voice steady. "The Council has laws against unprovoked military action." "Laws are just words," Vecthar said. He leaned down until his alien face was close to hers. "Power is what matters. The Dominion has power. Humanity does not." Jake watched the Emperor carefully. This was not a negotiation. It was a threat. And Vecthar was enjoying it.